Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar this morning. We totally appreciate how busy everyone is at the minute, and taking the time out to attend this morning is much appreciated. My name is Cormac McGreevy. I'm the BDM for the Business Development Manager for BeyondHR in Northern Ireland and Scotland. BeyondHR are a HR and health and safety consultancy firm. We help business owners to sleep at night by ensuring that they remain legally compliant and that their policies and procedures are as robust as possible. Today, my colleague Natalie O'Hare is going to take you through the Covid-19 vaccinations in the workplace webinar. If you would like to ask any questions, there's a Q&A box at the bottom, and we will endeavour to answer a few of these at the end of the webinar. Okay, Natalie, over to you.
Thanks, Cormac, for that lovely introduction. What I will just do is stop the video now, unfortunately, just to make sure that it keeps the connection due to the large number of participants on this morning. We want to make sure that you manage to get through all of the content that we have for you. So welcome this morning. What a topic to cover. COVID-19 vaccinations in the workplace. Very topical, very fast moving, with many views. But today we are mainly focusing on the risk and the considerations as a business owner in terms of vaccinations in the workplace. I'm sure you all have lots of questions noted down that you wanted to ask today. So as Cormac said, pop those in the Q&A section. Hopefully you'll all be able to see that on the scroll bar at the bottom, and we will cover as many questions as possible at the end of this webinar. It is being recorded, and just a bit of a caveat for us, I'm having a chuckle to myself, and we will cover this off as well, but the advice is purely today's advice only. It is changing, moving in direction, and things are facts and various things are changing day to day. So please be mindful of what we cover today may only be relevant today. So really, please seek advice at the particular time that you have that query. So as Cormac said, BeyondHR have supported businesses through furlough, which the scheme changed around 14 or 15 times. I've lost count now. A return to work and what that might look like in a business as well, all of the changes, all of the staffing structure, if consultation and changes to terms and conditions and variations had to happen. We have helped businesses through all of that. And the next stop in the journey is to now look at vaccinations in the workplace. So today what we will be covering is whether or not employers can make vaccinations compulsory, why forcing employees to be vaccinated could be an issue, and what constitutes a philosophical belief. We all love a bit of a statistic, and I think it's just a really good introduction to show where we are at the moment, both from an employer and from an employee perspective as well. So this first survey from Brodies, published on the 18th of May this year, 2,000 employers across, and this looked at mainly the outcomes from the employer perspective. So 66% of respondents to the survey said that they plan to encourage staff to take the vaccination. Consultation may be required to introduce some policies, etc., or such a policy, which means that there has to be obviously trade union or employee representatives. But if you are struggling or don't understand or don't know your duties for consultation, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. 33% of respondents indicated that they plan to consult with staff in relation to the introduction of a vaccine policy. Now, the 33% is fairly low, so it can be concluded that there is little awareness around the consultation and requirements for such a policy. 20% of respondents, employers indicated that they plan to require staff to disclose their vaccination status. We will go on to look at data protection and the considerations and that other potential minefield with regards to COVID vaccinations. And none of the respondents to the survey indicated that they plan to require staff to be vaccinated. And we'll look at the approaches to the policy throughout this session. Just a wee employee one that was there as well, although this was mainly about the employer perspective, was 40% of employees had expressed concern to HR or line managers about being vaccinated. 40%, so every 4 in 10 people had some concerns. And if that is you in your business, certainly it would be worth getting advice in terms of the next steps and what you can do. So as I said, across various sectors, and it's just good to know the current landscape for employers and where we are. From the employee perspective, so just over half, so this was a survey done by Glassdoor, and this was around 2,000 UK employers, and 56%, so just over half of UK employees think workers should be required to take the vaccine before being allowed back to the workplace. Quite interesting. 68% of employees reportedly believe that social distancing, wearing masks, all of those protocols should remain compulsory until everyone in the office has been vaccinated. 14% said that they would quit their job if they were forced to return to work before all staff have been vaccinated against the virus. And we'll go on to discuss and look at all the different types of groups. 12% of employees surveyed said that they do not intend to get the vaccine. Yet of this group, 1 in 4 revealed that they would be more likely to get it if their employer incentivised them to do so. YouGov survey, and it's just important to bear in mind as well. So we've looked at Brodies, we've looked at Glassdoor, but the YouGov survey, the current stats at the moment is there will be 1 in 5, roughly, is a good note to take. 1 in 5 employees will not be getting the COVID vaccination for various reasons, which we'll cover. And 39% of employees suggested that financial incentives, such as a cash bonus, would encourage them to take the jab. Again, quite interesting. So whether or not employers can make vaccinations compulsory, over recent weeks, we have had many queries from clients on this. Certainly every day now there are queries coming in about vaccinations. Can we enforce it? What do we do? So it's really important that we covered this off today. So at the moment, there is currently no legislation for UK government to mandate COVID vaccination, so it would require further legislation. There was a consultation that commenced in April, and I chuckle to myself now, our presentation was ready to go, all sorted, and then yesterday, right at the 11th hour in the afternoon, boom, something changes. So when I say it's changing and it's fast moving, I can't say that anymore. We were all ready to go, and then again, something changed yesterday. So at the moment, there is no legislation. However, the consultation was concluded, and the Quality and Human Rights Commission came out and said, actually, we would say in care homes only, in GB, so Scotland, England and Wales, not Northern Ireland at this moment, it may be reasonable to enforce mandatory COVID vaccinations. It's important to note this is only in the care home sector at the moment for older adult care home workers having to be vaccinated, or looking at the exemptions for anybody that has. So it's care homes. There is discussions and talk now about that then rolling into the NHS. But these are the only 2 parts of industry at the moment that have been looked at, and we'll go on to discuss a mandatory vaccination policy and what that will look like. Now, if that is deemed essential, you must detail that in your COVID risk assessment. Remember that document that we've been looking at and hopefully reviewing. It's not been lying gathering dust. We've managed to keep updating it since last February, last March time, when we had to get something in place. So it must be updated with vaccinations now that they're being rolled out, looking at potentially different age groups, the availability of the vaccine, what special measures are in place for anybody in your business that's clinically extremely vulnerable, and other safety measures with the vaccine as well, which again we'll talk about, and also refusal. We need to look at this, and that has to be either detailed in your risk assessment or your written policy that's in place. So it's these documents that are forever moving as well. And what I would say is you're getting advice and you're making a lot of decisions. Make sure you've got some kind of audit trail behind you, because the decisions that you make today, for example, yesterday's decision might be completely turned on its head now, and you've got more questions and you need more advice. So make sure that anything that you're making decisions on, you're maybe even just printing some of the literature off, to make sure that if anything in the future is ever challenged, that you have your audit trail of why you made that particular decision from anything that's published before the electronic copy is updated and the last information has disappeared. No jab, no job, not my words. It's been obviously in the public domain and in the media, and it's Plimlico Plumbers, and he's been very honest from the beginning and said, if you don't get the vaccine, I can't give you a job. Okay, so this approach, obviously he's not in the care home sector. It was before the Equality and Human Rights had came out with this, before they warned that blanket policies are likely to be unlawful, and we'll cover all that off. But basically, the business owner has decided that he wants to ultimately protect his customers and his clients, go down that health and safety route, and encourage, well, make mandatory, to be honest, the vaccine. No jab, no job. And also, if the vaccine becomes privately available, then he is willing to pay for employees' vaccinations. That's how serious he is in terms of his views on the no jab, no job policy. So that would be a mandatory policy for vaccination. However, if you do look at that approach, forcing employees to be vaccinated could be an issue. They're not suitable for everybody. So some people have a choice, and some people unfortunately don't have that choice to get the vaccination. That may be down to their GP telling them because they have a medical reason, severe allergies, etc., or they're suffering from long COVID. So again, the facts might say at the moment that those suffering from long COVID should hold off at the moment. It may be people that are fearful of needles, they don't want to get it, or there may just be people that don't want to get it, and that is a personal choice. In terms of them not being suitable, there is also discriminatory claims based on sex, age, disability, pregnancy, maternity, religion, belief, and race. And for these types of claims, they obviously carry compensation. So I would urge you to get familiar with this and to seek some further advice. But in terms of sex, if you have a mandatory vaccination policy, COVID vaccination policy in place, this may single out those women that are planning pregnancy. Yeah, the advice and guidance is changing all the time. But despite that, some females might decide that they still want to stay with their original decision and not receive the vaccine. So therefore, you would be putting these people at a disadvantage. Age, as we know, the vaccine is being rolled out by age. So in the main, younger employees may be at a disadvantage because they've just not had the option of getting their vaccination yet. They might want to get it, but they have to wait in the queue. Disability, again, for any medical exemptions, people may not have a choice. So if you have to force vaccination, those people may be at a disadvantage. Pregnancy and maternity, if people are not wanting to pose any risk to their unborn child or breastfeeding, etc., again, this may be another avenue to be aware of. Religion and belief as well. It may be against employee in your workforce's faith or their belief to take any vaccine, or in particular the COVID vaccine. And what's really important is that you don't identify employees though based on ethnicity or stereotype people. That again could create discrimination. You must distribute all information to everybody, regardless of sex, age, disability, religion, belief, any of these items. By focusing and pinpointing in one of these areas on its own could lead to any discrimination. And race, there is common stats at the moment saying that there is a higher resistance rate for ethnic minority groups. So this is just something to be mindful as well. And again, it might be against their faith, their belief, etc. Okay, so you need to think about these because there is the possibility that each of these will be in your workplace. And we talked about the stat again. So just as a reminder, maybe 1 in 5 people in your business, so you can do the maths, maybe 1 in 5 people in your business will be hesitant or will not get the COVID vaccination. So why else could it be an issue with putting such a policy in place? So you need to ensure that any mandatory vaccination requirement is justifiable as a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. Talk English to me. Okay, so what we're looking at here, and we'll break it down for you. So achieving a legitimate aim. So this is obviously the legal terminology that you would have to, if you ended up in a tribunal, you would have to be able to satisfy these tests. Now, the legitimate aim is probably the easiest part and the most likely part that you're able to put a big tick in the box. This is about protecting the health and safety of your employees, going with your duty of care, the Health and Safety at Work Act, all of that in terms of getting to that legitimate aim, which is protecting your workforce and your employees, your service users, your customers. It would be difficult at this stage to criticise you for trying to reduce transmission and encouraging the vaccine, absolutely, and by having a policy in place as well, it also helps achieve that legitimate aim. Where it is much more difficult if we look at the proportionate part of it, so it's the full thing, it's the proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. So the proportionate part, where your measures reasonably necessary, okay? So remember, legitimate aim, reasonably necessary, and that's probably quite more difficult at this current time because there are other COVID secure guidelines, wearing of masks, sanitisation, social distancing, testing, home working, redeployment into other roles that are maybe not so customer facing or working alone in isolation. These actually might be more effective and less discriminatory in order to achieve that legitimate aim. So it's just something to be very mindful of. And then that takes us to our second point as well. Even if you don't make a vaccination policy mandatory, you should ensure that your policies or your actions don't actually indirectly discriminate against unvaccinated employees. So what this could mean as an example, maybe for relaxing COVID measures for only vaccinated staff. Okay, well, then the younger employees or the pregnant employees might say, oh, wait a minute, I can't come back to the workplace, I really want to come back. So you've indirectly discriminated against these people as well. Or if you decide that you've got a mandatory policy in place and any action, any failure to follow the action to get the vaccine would result in disciplinary action. Again, it's likely to result in any discriminatory claim. So you just need to be very, very careful. And if you get to that situation, so remember that 1 in 5, seek advice if an employee refuses. What are your options? Dismissal, disciplinary, those are at the end of the train, to be honest. You need to look at things before that. We'll go on to talk about other avenues and what we can do, but it's all about understanding, sitting with the individual, finding out what they may have a really, really good reason that you don't even know about in terms of why they don't want to. They may have bought all the books on Amazon that talk about all theories, etc., and they're confused in their own head what they should or shouldn't do. So please get advice. There are many things that you can do prior to looking at any of those harsh and risky options. So just pick up the phone and see what your options are, and we can certainly talk through all of that. But maybe it's important for you to know that you may have at least one employee in your business that will be in this situation. Not only with the discrimination and the fact that the vaccine is not suitable for everybody, but we also have the risk of a philosophical belief. So what this means basically is some employees may have a strongly held belief that vaccines are harmful to public health. It will be down, will this amount to a protected belief? It would be down to tribunal to decide this. It wouldn't be down to you or I. And there is a case that we can look at here, which is Granger versus Nicholson, which laid out some tests. So basically, Mr. Nicholson was the head of sustainability from September 2007 to July 2008, when he was made redundant. Now, he was made redundant from Granger, which is a residential property investment company. And he put claims in for unfair dismissal and discrimination on the grounds of religion and belief. So he linked his redundancy to the fact that he had a strongly held belief. Okay, a strongly held philosophical belief. And his belief was about climate change and the environment. Now, it was really important to note here, it wasn't an opinion, it was a belief. His life was all about this belief. So his choice of house, his choice of home, how he travelled, he didn't go on airplanes, for example, what he bought in terms of purchases, what he ate and drank, he limited eating meat, what he does with his waste. Yep, and he had a genuine fear that the human race was going to fail to reduce carbon emission on a global scale. He had that genuine fear. So it's really important to know it's not just an opinion, but it's certainly a belief. And he was able to satisfy the tribunal that that was, it was a belief, it wasn't just an opinion. And in order to do so from this case, a philosophical belief would mean that it would have to attain a certain level of cogency, seriousness, cohesion, and importance. So this means that it would be clear, logical, and a convincing argument. Mr. Nicholson was able to do this. It's worthy of respect in a democratic society. His beliefs were worthy of that. It was not incompatible with human dignity, and it did not conflict with the fundamental rights of others. So we do need to think about employees in your business and their thoughts maybe that vaccines are harmful to public health. We do need to think about employees in your business that have the view that natural medicine is the only way forward for them. Is that genuinely held and worthy of respect? A tribunal will decide. And it also may relate to any vegan employees in your business as well. If any, not just the COVID vaccine, I guess, but if any vaccine does contain any animal products, these may be the people that would be worthy of looking at that philosophical belief. So it's just another avenue and another risk for you to consider. And in terms of having that policy, so we've talked about having a mandatory you must get, but now let's look at some other thoughts. So CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, as COVID measures increases throughout the UK, employers must plan the implications for their staff, visitors and workplace as a whole, covering communication to encourage take-up, risk assessment and vaccination policy. So CIPD are saying you need a policy, you need to communicate, but that policy has to be about encouragement. CIPD are very much about encouragement, engagement and education for COVID vaccinations, okay? Very different to mandating them. ACAS, if an employer feels it's important for staff to be vaccinated, they should talk together with staff or the organisation's recognised trade union to discuss what steps to take. So they're saying you need to work with people to see what we need to do here. Any decision after that discussion, so whether that's we need to make it mandatory or we will encourage, should be put in writing, for example, in a workplace policy. And the Labour Relations Agency, they advise that employers seek to put in place a vaccination policy or an addendum to an existing policy to explain how issues relating to the vaccinations will be handled in the workplace. So these three reputable sources are all telling us that we need to consider, we need to engage, and we can engage that through a policy. And certainly for a policy that would tick the box for meeting the legitimate aim as well from the legal part that we talked about earlier. Okay, but remember, obviously, unless you're a care home in GB all of this would apply. The mandatory vaccinations at the moment may only apply to the care sector in Scotland, England and Wales, unless you decide to take it on yourself and get some advice and maybe take a risk, but that would be down to yourself. But what we're saying is engagement may be the way forward if that is suitable for your business. So an alternative to introducing, and that choice is yours, is to introduce which encourages all employees to receive the vaccine when possible, but accepts that actually there are circumstances in which it's not appropriate. So if you're looking to implement a policy, you need to consult with employee reps or unions, and you might think, how do I do that? I've never done that before. Absolutely no problem. Just pick up the phone and we can talk you through the process and the circumstances. How you intend to communicate with staff about the policy, including how you will use employees' personal data, which again is something that we'll go on to discuss, but how will you be communicating? Your data protection obligations for processing that data, and also your legal responsibilities with doing that. How you can use the policy to reduce the risk of workplace conflict between vaccinated and unvaccinated staff. So there may be strong views in your business. There may be people airing those views every day. There may be people that are getting annoyed with those views. And there may be certain workplace conflict that you just need to work around for COVID vaccinations and people's thoughts. So how will you tackle this as well? And in what circumstances you need to review the policy, for example, when private vaccination becomes possible or when things change overnight. So you always need to be on top of the game in terms of knowing exactly what's happening, and we can help guide you on that. Other issues, yeah, I'm afraid there are some more to consider. So we've looked at they're not suitable for everyone. We've looked at the discrimination. We've looked at the philosophical belief avenue, but we also need to consider human rights as well. So not only are there health and safety, employment law, but there is also human rights. So everyone has a choice for this vaccine. And would it potentially be an invasion of privacy in order to make employees in your business get it? Practical workplace issues, well, what happens if employees refuse? What can we do? Can we look at alternative roles for those that are unvaccinated? Things like what happens about sick pay as well for those that choose or don't choose to get the vaccination? What about our documentation? If we're having a policy that we really encourage, then should we be writing this into the contracts of employment? Have we got an audit trail for all the decisions that we've made in the business, etc.? And as a very last resort, if we went through all of that, what happens if we need to pick up the phone and talk about disciplining or dismissing on the basis of this? So all of these issues will be issues that you will come up against in the next weeks, months, days, you will see. And GDPR considerations as well. So medical information is a special category of data. Is it necessary? Is it proportionate that we ask employees to tell us if they've been vaccinated? Again, this is something that's forever changing in terms of COVID passports, etc. So all of those GDPR considerations as well. There is obviously the health and safety route to justify for asking employees, but with other current measures in place, this may weaken your case for why you're asking. But again, get advice at the time. This may move again as well, and make sure, regardless, remember GDPR, you must process any kind of data fairly and lawfully, and have a look at your employee privacy policy as well. Does that need updated? And if you are asking, make sure it's for a clear and compelling reason. It's not just in case. We'll just ask them just in case. It has to be for a clear and compelling. And remember, different roles, different sectors, different rules. Each industry, each sector may down the line, obviously that's care homes being looked at the moment, the NHS has been looked at, but keep an eye on different roles, different sectors, all having different rules. So that has absolutely been a whistle-stop tour, and I'll just give a wee short summary at the moment. But what we've covered today, first of all, before that summary, is whether or not employers can make vaccinations compulsory, why forcing employees to be vaccinated could be an issue, and what constitutes a philosophical belief. So in summary, just be mindful of the risks and seek advice, no matter what kind of policy, whether it be the mandatory, which carries more risk, or the encouraging policy. Pick up the phone, get some advice, let's talk through your specifics. And there are risks of discrimination in having a mandatory policy in place that we talked about: age, sex, race, religion, belief, all of that. There are no test cases as yet on the subject. We wait in anticipation, but there's none out there at the moment in terms of the COVID vaccination. No jab, no job. We'll see where that goes, but we need to stay on top of all of this to see what we need to do as a business and the decisions that we have to make. Another thing to think about is, would the discrimination occur on the basis of having that philosophical belief, and what type of policy are you going to have? And let's get all that written down, let's discuss it and what we go for. But in summary as well, remember, a vaccination policy is just part of the overall picture, if you like. It's not the be all and end all. It helps obviously with the amount of people that may be able to come to work and attend safely, but it's part of the overall matrix, and it's not a substitute for our measures as well. You still need to have everything else in place as well.
Thank you very much, Natalie. That was brilliant, very insightful and very useful. We have had a few questions that have come through just when you were presenting. Do you have enough to tackle a few of those?
Yeah, no problem. That's great. It's a minefield of an area, and I knew there would be quite a lot of questions, so no problem.
Okay. So the first one that actually came through just when you were talking about employers and what they could do was what was it? Is there anything else that businesses can do to encourage employees to take the vaccine? Absolutely,
yes. CIPD, ACAS, there are LRA, there are steps that can be taken in terms of encouragement as well. So providing factual information may be one of those. That might be through Sorry, I completely lost my connection there. Hopefully everyone is still on, and it was just me that zoomed out there in full flow, Cormac.
I think it was. The second question that came through, Natalie, was what you were talking about vaccination policies and why you should have them. Is there any tips on what should be included in a vaccination policy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of a policy, what you're looking at is, first of all, the company stance. So are you taking a mandatory choice, or are you taking more the encouragement? Thinking about obviously anything that keeps changing in terms of any legislation, etc. How you're going to manage it as well. What about sick pay obligations? What about appointments? All of those things, and just looking at any of those categories of employees as well throughout your policy and how you will manage it. Lots to think about for a policy. We have a sample policy if anybody is looking for one that we're able to give out, but lots of things that you would need to include.
Okay, and obviously then, so we're employers are going to be encouraging maybe encouraging employees to get the vaccination. Are they obliged to give time off for employees to go and to get the vaccine? Because I know from my own experience and other people, it's tends to be during work hours or not at the weekend, you know. So is there an obligation to allow time off to go and get the vaccine?
Okay, really good question there. Thanks to whoever posted that. So yeah, in terms, we're looking at encouragement here, we're looking at what we can do. So you may have your own medical appointment clause in your contract or in your current documentation, but you might decide to step out of that for the purposes of the COVID vaccination. We're looking at encouragement, education. So how do we encourage? So it may be that you do decide to give those appointments as paid time. It could go on a bit further as well, to be honest, Cormac, because what you could do is looking at anybody that has any symptoms, that they are not penalised financially either. So maybe in terms of SSP, you might, and it's completely down to the employer, but if you're looking at ways to encourage, these are all the things that would be potential issues. And maybe around, so it might be paid time for appointments, it might be looking at absence trigger levels and taking any COVID related out of any of the triggers that you're looking at, and making sure that people are not at financial detriment, for example, when they need to call in sick the day after and they've got really bad symptoms. So, but it's down to the employer to decide, and you may step out of your current policy or your current clause for the sake of this.
Okay, no problem. And then after all of this, and you've got the vaccination policy in place and you've done everything you can, what if an employee just refuses to get the vaccine?
Okay, so I guess, yeah, we've been asked this already from clients. We need to try and work with them. We need to try and find out. We need to encourage. We need to educate. We need to find out what their reasons are in terms of not getting it, and how can we work around that. Discipline and dismissal is there as an option, a risky option potentially, but we need to try and find out. But it depends what your policy is. Is it mandatory? Is it encouragement? Does that pose any risks? We might need to look at moving them into another area that's therefore less risk, because they might have a really good reason as to why they don't want to take it. So we just need to be really careful, but try the encouragement first of all. They might not have been educated in terms of knowing the advantages, and again, that should be included in your policy. If someone is to pick that up, they should be able to read the advantages, factual information, remember, no opinion, any publicised information really that's out there that outlines the benefits. Okay, brilliant.
We also had there was a question from Yvonne asking for a copy of the slides, but we are recording the webinar today, so it will be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully within a couple of days. And you can subscribe when you're there if you go on and view the YouTube channel. If there are any other questions, any burning issues at all, please feel free to get in touch. You can send us an email and inquiries at wegobeyondhr.com, or ring into the office, and you can speak to one of the consultants as well. So thank you very much, everyone, again for attending. Everyone who was on at the beginning has stayed till the end, which is great. And thank you, Natalie, for your time as well and all the useful information. So thank you very much, and cheerio, everybody.